September 1997. 1 week after her fatal car crash in Paris's Alma Tunnel, the whole royal family attended Princess Diana's funeral. But for years, this young woman had already been dead to the English monarchy. Five years earlier, Diana shared intimate stories with journalist Andrew Morton that he'd go on to publish in a scandalous book. It shook Buckingham Palace, and since then, the rupture between the palace and the princess has been total. The last years of Diana's life were marked by a series of provocative revelations and began an all-out war between the court of England and the woman who English citizens called the Princess of Hearts, up until her death and for many years after. But how did this young 36-year-old woman, first presented as being so docile, become such a strong adversary to the throne? And how can we better understand that her life was actually so very tragic? Well, that's why I wanted to make this film. I wanted to follow the adventures of this unlikely rebel step by step and understand how the British monarchy was powerless in their attempt to keep the fairy tale they had tried to sell the world from becoming a nightmare. Diana's destiny started taking shape on July 1st, 1969, during one of those ceremonies that to us seem boring and old-fashioned. That day, the Queen confirmed her eldest son as Charles, Prince of Wales. Charles, the Prince of Wales, this title given to all heirs to the British crown meant two things. First, he had to get married. Then, he had to have children. This is the most important thing for anyone who is going to become the sovereign leader. Sure, they'll have to rule over the land, but they especially need to perpetuate the species.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship.
And by coincidence, pure coincidence, on this same day, July 1st, 1969, maybe at the precise time that the Queen kissed Charles, Diana was celebrating her birthday. She was only 8 years old at the time, so she didn't know it yet, poor thing, but this was the man who'd become her husband and ruin her life.
Charles is a troubled character himself. He's not somebody who's ever been very comfortable in his own skin, I would say. He felt that he was disapproved of somehow by his father, that he was in awe of his mother, that he couldn't quite live up to her role model that she was. And also he was very conscious of his duty. He is quite a dutiful person.
When he was in his early 20s, he was an extremely earnest fellow, very determined to do the right thing. His parents put a great deal of pressure on him to go here and go there, to do this, to do that. He had to be action man. He had to fly a plane. He had to speak several languages. He had to have been to Cambridge University. He had to appear here, there, and everywhere and be interested in everything. He did the best that he could. He was very earnest, very determined that he should leave his mark on the world. He was a diligent, dry, reserved man who at the same time was spoilt, opinionated, and expected everybody to bow the knee before him.
So, he was a good little prince, but still used to getting his way with everyone, except for his mother and father, who were strict with him since childhood. A good little prince, and probably more talented than the majority of crowned heads. He was perfectly aware of his abilities and wanted to push his physical boundaries, something the court respected very much. But he also wanted to be politically useful, which was, for a future king, absolutely unnecessary.
Il casse les codes, il est considéré par sa mère comme quelqu'un de profondément dangereux pour la monarchie, mais pour le coup pour des raisons politiques. Il revendique certaines idées et une certaine façon de penser son rôle politique. Or, la monarchie anglaise tient aussi par le fait qu'elle n'exerce pas un rôle politique, mais un rôle symbolique.
Il avait demandé à être nommé représentant de la reine en Australie. Et puis après, il avait voulu être nommé gouverneur de Hong Kong. Cette demande n'a pas été suivie par le gouvernement, d'abord parce que Charles était un peu imprévisible dans ses discours, donc c'était quand même assez compliqué. Du coup, Charles se consacre à des activités philanthropiques, et puis, effectivement, il semblait renâcler à réaliser ce qui est sa fonction première, donc produire un héritier pour la couronne, puisqu'il ne se mariait pas.
Yes, Charles had a serious problem. That's how the royal family saw it anyway. He loved women too much and didn't hide it. But many of them didn't seem to mind. The Queen, in all her kindness, could tolerate such behavior from the young prince when he was 18 or 20 years old. But it was far more difficult for her to act like everything was okay when her offspring wasn't calming down, even after he turned 30. Fond admirers, models, movie stars, not everyone fell in love, but they were happy to be seen next to him, on the dance floor even. There were very pretty girls who were fine being in front of the cameras with him.
The pressure got to him, and he started to be criticized a great deal because he was taking a lot of girls out and not getting married. And everybody saw his prime job as getting married and having a son and furthering the monarchy.
Ce qui est craint à la fin des années 70, c'est que Charles, en multipliant les aventures avec des femmes mariées et qui ne sont pas d'un statut qui permettrait un mariage, mette effectivement la monarchie en danger.
The palace decided that Charles needed help finding a wife. Since his grandmother was an experienced matron, she proposed her services. Known as Queen Mother, Charles's grandmother took the throne under George VI, and she was quite popular. Charles loved and trusted her, so he let her oversee his future marriage.
What we were expecting was either for a Prince of Wales to marry in his own class, i.e. another royal, and there were lots of foreign royals who were put up. Princess Astrid of Luxembourg was one of them, for example. Or alternatively to marry into the aristocracy.
That was the traditional way that the royal family had always behaved. It was thought it was safer to have an equal match, that it was thought impossible for a member of the royal family to marry a subject. And also the fear of having somebody with a past was partly to do with the fact that people could sell stories, that there would be indiscretions in the press.
Every time Charles appeared in public with a girlfriend, the way the newspapers put it was, has she got a past? Has she got experience? A polite way of saying, is she a virgin? Because even though in those days British people were shacking up together, divorcing, screwing each other, doing whatever, they wanted the royal family to act by the standards of a previous generation.
The royal family was in a hurry, and so that casting didn't last long. Very quickly, the Queen Mother pulled the name of a young lady out of her hat. It was none other than the granddaughter of her own lady-in-waiting. The two elderly women knew each other well and convinced each other that they had made the right choice with Diana Spencer, a 19-year-old aristocrat from a very respectable family.
The Spencer family were very grand indeed. They went back to medieval times, and like many of the aristocrats in Britain, they thought of themselves as being rather grander than the royal family.
Not least because they also married into the Churchill family, which is also a magnificently ancient and ducal family. And so they are right at the very top of the pyramid of British society.
They had a massive estate in the middle of England, and John Spencer, grown up knowing that he would one day inherit all this. There was no real need to work, and he didn't do very much. He was in the army, then he had a sort of temporary job working for the royal family. Frances, the mother, was also an aristocrat. She was just the kind of person who would be expected to marry the son and heir of a fabulous estate.
So this is how Diana experienced that day, July 1st, 1961, in Norfolk County, along with her two older sisters, Sarah and Jane. She was a charming little girl, but obligated her mother to get right back to work in order to produce a male heir. Diana understood very quickly that her parents didn't want to have her, even if they did love her. She would grow up with the weight of knowing they were disappointed about having yet another girl. Luckily, her father had a large, beautiful domain where Diana loved to get lost in the fields or surrounding woods. They had absolutely everything: tennis courts, a swimming pool, a lake, an animal farm. At first glance, you might think that the future princess was raised in a little slice of paradise. To the royal family, Diana could only be the perfect English rose, and one they could choose from a catalogue without a second thought.
She's pretty, she's young, she's a virgin, or appears to be a virgin, a thing that's very, very difficult to find. She's shy, she's malleable. All those things at the time seemed perfect.
And that's why she was chosen. They misjudged her. They took her background, they thought that was good, and they looked at her personality and thought she was meek. No, she was not.
But this was the casting mistake of the century. A huge error made by a little group of elites who were cut off from the rest of the world and whose blinders were much bigger than the ones they put on their carriage horses. The grass was green and the beds were soft in the beautiful Spencer domain. But behind the walls, sadness was king. This was the ugly truth that the royal family preferred knowing nothing about. They refused, for example, to see that Diana's parents had a relationship marked by resentment and violence. That in these salons steeped in history, the future princess heard shouts and insults every day, and that she even saw her father hit her mother. Diana's childhood not only scarred her, it traumatized her.
There's a myth in the British nobility that there is bad blood in certain families, and certainly some people believe that the Spencers had very bad blood.
The individuals in that family were psychologically broken, bitter, twisted. I mean, look what happened when her parents divorced.
When Johnny and Frances divorced, that really was quite a shock. People tend to think that Frances ran away and left her children behind. In fact, what had happened was she had started a divorce proceedings against Johnny, citing his cruelty. The most important thing to bear in mind here when thinking about Diana is what sort of atmosphere did she grow up in as a small child before her mother actually left. Many bad things were going on in her home. Johnny Spencer was close to the royal family. He managed to stop his wife's action against him, the cruelty case, and then he brought his own case for desertion against her. She had no alternative but to leave the family home. Diana felt tremendously abandoned. Her two older sisters had gone to London with their mother. She was left with her father, and she and Charles, her younger brother, used to cling together almost for safety's sake because of the atmosphere which was going on.
There's great personal flaws inside that family. And if you were a social worker going to some broken family like that on a council estate in Birmingham, you'd say, oh, of course, any girl from that sort of psychological, mixed up, bitter, stabbing in the background is going to be pretty mixed up herself.
Diana inherited some of that anger too, but what she managed to do is she managed to keep the lid on the pressure cooker. You never were really sure what her feelings were. She learned very early on to hide her feelings, and she became then an extremely complex animal. If you don't let your feelings out and you keep them within, you do become a very complex animal, and that's what happened with her.
But no one in the court dared tell the Queen she'd better try to understand her future daughter-in-law a little more and pay more attention to childhood psychoanalysis than to her horses. In adolescence, Diana was like Cinderella, minus the shoes, plus the neurosis. Her mother was forced to abandon her and flee the marital home. Her father made things worse by marrying a woman who would put Cinderella's stepmother to shame. And the ironic part was that this woman was the daughter of an extravagant, cartoonish woman named Barbara Cartland, whose romance novels Diana read when she was younger.
Diana hated her stepmother, Rain Spencer, because Rain took away the last thing that Diana could cling to. Johnny Spencer had fallen in love with his second wife, and she had cordoned him off. What she wanted to do was she wanted to rule her husband and run Althorpe, the family estate. In order to be able to do that successfully, she needed to put a distance between the father, Johnny, and his children. And so she was very effective in doing that, and the children all hated her. They absolutely loathed her.
Her actual name was Rain. They had this nickname for her, Acid Rain, which was cruel, but nonetheless it had its own internal honesty.
You might say that Diana accepting Prince Charles's proposal of marriage was an escape route to get out of the horrible family situation she was in back at home.
At 18 years old, after an average education and without plans to pursue more studies, Diana packed her bags and went to London, sharing her apartment with 3 girlfriends. It was without a doubt the happiest time of her life, the most carefree, the most fun.
As a young adolescent, Diana had a life in London that was fun, that was full of dinner parties and drinks parties, but it wasn't in any way debauched. There was, back in the 1980s, very much a debauched lifestyle of the British aristocracy. They took drugs, they drank a lot, they were sexually promiscuous. She was not of that type at all. She wasn't in that group. She was much more in the group of other kindergarten teachers, frankly.
So after working a series of low-paying jobs, Diana ended up as an assistant in a Pimlico neighborhood nursery school. Since she had no vocation and let the whims of fate guide her, taking care of children suited her well. And if the royal family hadn't had its eyes set on her, she might just have stayed there for a few more years, waiting to fall in love with the right man.
She never fell in love. Most teenage girls want to fall in love. They want to find somebody who they can give their heart to, even if they don't marry them. And in those 2 years when Diana was in London, nobody came along who really, really captured her imagination, who took her heart away.
And so it was him, this man pressured by his family to get married. One fine day, he'd come to see Diana and ask her to marry him, as if it were obvious that she'd say yes.
Not only Diana, but virtually every other girl of her age in Britain would love to picture herself married to a prince, carried around in carriages, allowed to wear tiaras and diamonds and beautiful dresses. Every girl in Britain wanted to be Princess of Wales, and Diana was going to do it. Is she going to say no? No, she's not.
Morning. Morning, dear. Can you just explain to us if we all might know what's like to happen between the two of you? Can you say if you're likely to make any announcement soon? Have you any comment to make it?
Let it die.
No comment all round. Did you have a good weekend though? It's work now, okay?
Journalists would soon have an answer to the question that had been plaguing them. The court very quickly announced that the 2 lovebirds were engaged and that they'd soon be married. And just like that, Diana became the girlfriend of Britain's most famous and eligible bachelor. And prey for British tabloids, which are to the press what mildew is to a vine. An infection. But incredibly, no one suspected what would happen next. That Diana's subconscience would be much stronger than the court's protocol.
She went into that marriage with expectations of a fairy tale. The country talked of it as though it was a fairy tale. The press talked of it as though it was a fairy tale. But perhaps the person who believed the fairy tale most of all was Diana, as a very naive 19-year-old girl. She was besotted with Prince Charles.
Diana and Charles. Charles and Diana. One of the most beautiful photos of their relationship, and one of the most misleading too. Because not only did Charles accept to marry Diana out of obligation and not love, but his heart already belonged to someone else for a long time now. Camilla Parker Bowles.
Camilla is a hugely important character in this story. Camilla was the person with whom Charles felt at home. She was the person he felt most comfortable with. She was easygoing, warm, fun, relaxed, the absolute opposite of the royal family. So you can see why Charles felt comfortable with her.
I met Camilla at about the same time as Prince Charles did. I used to go to polo at Smith's Lawn near Windsor Castle, and she was one of a group of women who used to go and watch the polo. Most of the girls there were beautifully turned out, and they would have a Hermes scarf on. They would have a Gucci bag. And Camilla would turn up wearing an old pair of jeans held together with a safety pin and not care at all about what she looked like, and her hair was all over the place. But there was a sort of animal magnetism about her which made her different from the others. The English aristocrats were just a bit too well-bred, a bit too well turned out, and she was animal.
The ties that bound Charles and Camilla were as strong as they were long-standing. But marrying her was impossible since she wasn't of royal blood and didn't belong to the aristocracy. Their love was doomed to secrecy.
Camilla lui a dit, écoute, Marie, cette idiote, elle n'y verra rien, elle est toute émerveillée par la royauté, c'est exactement le genre de fille qu'il nous faut pour poursuivre notre liaison. Elle t'embêtera pas, elle comprend rien à rien, elle est idiote.
She called her the mouse. She looked like a mouse. That's what Camilla called her.
And it's true that the little mouse was at first perfect. She moved into the palace after the engagement announcement and attended ceremonies from time to time. Within a few weeks, it looked as if though she had found her place in her new family, who displayed her like a trophy.
At the time of the marriage, both of the couple presented themselves to the world as the wise, sophisticated, intellectual, Cambridge-educated husband. And Diana was very happy to play the little ingénue who was prepared to learn from Charles. And that could have worked as well.
Yes, it seemed that Charles showed her the way, inaugurating exhibits, cutting ribbons with more or less ease, and with Diana by his side to smile, charm the guests, and to receive flowers and compliments. She was able to do the few symbolic gestures required of her with a bit of goodwill and simplicity, which distracted her for a few hours from the doubt eating at her while Charles was away, or, indiscreet lover that he was, after she'd find clues.
Il y a la fameuse histoire du bracelet, un bracelet qui vient de chez Asprey, un des plus grands bijoutiers londoniens, qui est livré pour le prince Charles. Bon, Diana regarde, l'ouvre pour voir ce que c'est. C'est un bracelet avec deux initiales, G et F. Et donc il apparaît que ce bracelet, en fait, c'était un cadeau que Charles voulait faire à Camilla Parker Bowles. Et donc c'était Fred et Gladys qui étaient leurs surnoms. Alors Charles lui dit, mais non, pas du tout, ce n'est pas ce que tu crois. Il s'agit d'un cadeau pour justement montrer que c'est la fin de ma liaison avec elle, puisque, bon, maintenant, nous sommes fiancés, je vais t'épouser. Elle l'a probablement cru.
She thought that she could see Camilla off. She was younger, she was prettier, she came from a better aristocratic bloodline, and she could marry Prince Charles, which Camilla couldn't. She could produce the next King of England, which Camilla couldn't. So she knew that she was going to win this battle, but it turned out not to be.
How you feel today, both of you?
Difficult to find the right sort of word, isn't it, really? Just delighted and happy. And I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on. And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Yes.
The television interview was a moment of pure embarrassment for him because he knew that Camilla was watching and he didn't want to say that he was in love with the woman he was going to marry because that would be to betray his love of Camilla. And that's why he pushed that question so embarrassedly to one side, because Camilla was watching.
They weren't yet husband and wife, but Diana could already tell that their relationship might just be an illusion. Her own sister, Sarah, had dated Charles at one point and warned of his infidelity. And her deep sadness sometimes showed in public, like the time she burst into tears and had to be taken away.
Il est très clair que Diana était victime du système Windsor. Ce système qui veut qu'on épouse quelqu'un de son milieu et, après cela, on a des aventures extra-conjugales tout en restant ensemble parce qu'il faut sauver la face dans le milieu social auquel on appartient. Donc c'est une victime de ce milieu. Mais en même temps, elle vient de ce milieu. Elle en connaît les codes. Elle est allée dans les écoles où on enseigne ces codes. Elle est allée aux parties qui se déroulent selon ces codes. Elle représente la société de classe dans toute son horreur, comme elle n'existe qu'au Royaume-Uni.
Definitely she was a victim, but she was a victim of her own ambition. She knew everything about royalty. She came to the marriage full of the knowledge of what life was like behind palace walls, and yet she was prepared to throw herself to the wolves.
For the great majority of English people, the wolves of Buckingham Palace still looked like lambs. And everyone was excitedly preparing for Charles and Diana's wedding. The British monarchy is expensive, but it also generates hundreds of millions of pounds. A marriage, a birth, a jubilee, and business starts looking up. On August 29, 1981, Diana thought of something other than how profitable her marriage would be. Because even as the journalists were rushing to the palace, she was still hesitating about getting married, even asking her sisters if there wasn't a possible plan B. It's true that the night before their marriage, Charles, with great tact and sensitivity, had spent the night with Camilla. But when the day came, Diana showed up and several hundreds of millions of TV viewers watched her make her way to St. Paul's Cathedral, accompanied by her father. "You can't go back," one of her sisters said to her. "Your face is already printed on the towels and teacups." And Diana walked down the aisle as if she had no other choice than to surrender to the monarchy. Among the most notable guests, sitting in the third row, was her husband's mistress, wearing a light gray suit and a little purple hat, living proof of the royal masquerade that everyone pretended to believe.
I, Diana Francis.
I, Diana Francis.
Take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George.
To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
To have and to hold.
To have and to hold.
From this day forward.
From this day forward.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
To love and to cherish.
To love and to cherish.
Till death us do part.
Till death us do part.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
Everybody was fooled because everybody wanted to be fooled. And for a moment, their judgment slipped. They allowed themselves to believe something which truly was not believable.
You have a beautiful, glamorous 19-year-old girl who is marrying the heir to the throne. They become an international media sensation on the day of their wedding. Nobody can get enough of the pictures of them. Of course, everybody wants to believe that this could be real, that this could be love.
It's the nature of the British people that they want to believe in monarchy. It's an abstract ideal, if you like. It's not something that really exists in reality. We create a bubble in our imagination, and the royal family lives inside that bubble, and we believe what they want us to believe. We're ready, we're willing to accept what they tell us they do with their lives. We're a pushover for royalty.
You guessed it, after the wedding comes the honeymoon. But if Diana was hoping for alone time with Charles on the yacht Britannia, if she had imagined that they'd simply enjoy these few days and become a little closer, as all newlyweds do, then there's no doubt she was disappointed. She described her wedding as the most confusing day of her life. And when asked about her honeymoon, she said, "It was a wonderful chance to catch up on my sleep." While Charles passed his time with some of the 300 people he had brought along, crew members and guests, yes, Diana spent her time sleeping. But once back on shore, the young bride was a good sport and accepted to show off her talents as an actress in this happiness charade, giving photographers the pictures they wanted. She was so photogenic, so happy-looking, so radiant, that even today you might wonder how she could have been so profoundly unhappy. And if Camilla was really omnipresent.
The princess didn't say an awful lot, but she was asked how she was liking married life.
Highly recommend.
It is said that Charles had pledged that he would no longer have anything to do with Camilla.
Camilla, au départ, avait dit au prince Charles, la veille de son mariage, nous ne nous verrons pas pendant 3 ans. Ensuite, très vite, ils se sont revus, et elle le savait.
She discovers letters from Camilla to Charles. He is wearing cufflinks from Camilla on his honeymoon. And she realizes, even before they get to Balmoral, that Charles is thinking about Camilla more than he's thinking about her, his new wife.
La question est peut-être naïve, mais Charles ne souhaitait pas que son mariage fonctionne un tant soit peu.
I think he genuinely wanted it to work, but perhaps he was too clever a man just to simply fall in love and be the partner of someone who was so much younger and simpler than him. There's no doubt that Prince Charles picked out a sweet, unspoiled girl. I mean, literally a girl, not yet a woman.
Elle n'avait pas la maturité nécessaire pour apporter à Charles ce qu'il attendait d'une femme. Elle n'avait pas la profondeur de Charles, qui avait des centres d'intérêt bien marqués, que ce soit l'architecture, que ce soit l'environnement. Donc rien ne les rapprochait. Et alors, Charles aurait pu expliquer aussi à Diana ce qu'il attendait d'elle. Mais voilà, il n'y avait jamais véritablement de communication entre eux.
In fact, no one communicated in the royal family. It's as if everyone made it a badge of honor to lack in this department. Though it is very useful, this thing called speaking, which allows you to express what you think or feel by making sounds.
Elle a été en quelque sorte jetée dans cette famille sans avoir personne pour l'aider à comprendre quel allait être désormais son métier de princesse de Galles.
On avait chargé la reine-mère de s'occuper d'elle et de lui expliquer le protocole de la famille royale, les us et coutumes des Windsor. Et en fait, la reine-mère ne s'est jamais occupée d'elle.
Elle n'avait pas de guide, pas de mentor. Elle pensait sans doute que Charles serait un conseil, un appui. Il ne l'a pas été.
Ce sont des rites que Diana a eu du mal à intégrer parce que ce mariage était dysfonctionnel. Parce qu'il n'y avait aucun terrain d'entente entre Charles et Diana, Alors que la raison pour laquelle Camilla et Charles s'entendent si bien, c'est que finalement, Camilla a été la conseillère de Charles de tout temps. Il ne pouvait pas tenir son rôle de prince de Galles sans l'avoir. Elle a toujours été un soutien pour lui.
That's what Diana couldn't stand, to simply be Camilla's double. To be of no other use to Charles than to look good in photos while waiting to produce a descendant to the throne. And yes, even if we have a hard time feeling sorry for them, pretty princesses can suffer in their castles once they're married, when there are no more dragons, no sorcerers, and when they discover something unexpected about their prince, that he doesn't care.
Diana was an incredibly needy, complicated character. She felt that she'd been rejected by her mother. She was indulged by her father. She was certainly very demanding of love. So to start with, what she wanted was absolute attention from her husband. And when she didn't get that, she became very troubled.
We know that in the first few months that she was at Balmoral, Diana started behaving in her various strange ways. Crying fits. We now know she had her bulimia. We now know she had her eating disorders. It was already starting, and it's plausible to say that it was the pressure of the situation.
Charles didn't know what to do about the many symptoms Diana was showing, and certainly didn't know how to handle her flamboyant hysteria, since it went against the Victorian moral lesson he learned at such an early age. Never complain, never explain. It means you should always remain stoic for the public, and in order to do this, avoid the expression of feelings like the plague. But Diana was incapable of that. She could just barely manage to keep up the royal act in public, and so was more concerned with finding a divan to rest on than making a good impression for the prince.
The Queen herself made every effort to make that marriage work. She instantly arranges for Diana to secretly have some time with the very best psychologists to talk to her, counsel her. And then, when in the months after that she goes on being disturbed, the Queen thinks, well, it's obviously the pressure of the newspapers. And so for the first time ever, she calls in every single newspaper editor and says, please, give the girl a break.
But it was already too late for the Queen's good intentions to make any difference. Too late for Diana's torment to calm. Too late for the press to leave someone who looked so good in the limelight alone. Because since her marriage, the princess's popularity just kept growing. And every time she stepped out, she provoked a real craze among crowds of onlookers. Charles finally embraced it, knowing that he too could benefit from this renewed love for the monarchy. He condescendingly observed this woman who he knew was fragile, put on a good face to the public, convinced that when the time came, she'd fall in line. After all, Charles was still just a prince. But when he'd become king, Diana would be obligated to give him the spotlight. And like all spouses of a reigning sovereign, she would inevitably lose her luster. Since this was the case, thought Charles, let's not waste any time and go right to the essential, meaning the next step.
C'est le rôle principal qu'on attendait de la princesse Diana lorsqu'elle est entrée dans la famille Windsor, produire deux héritiers.
Yes, Diana had to produce two heirs. You needed an extra one as a security measure, because you can never be too careful. Charles said that he always needed a spare one. That was his expression. There was a collective sigh of relief when, after 2 months of marriage, Diana's pregnancy was announced. At least the royal family was relieved that their plan wasn't so bad. But it was made without taking into account this strange phenomenon that Freud called fate neurosis, like a strong appetite for death, which constantly sabotaged her attempts at happiness, which explains why, when she was pregnant, she violently threw herself down the steps, letting the palace resonate with the sound of a falling princess.
The falling down the stairs episode clearly was a cry for help, clearly was a sign of maladjustment in the most profound way. I mean, you are carrying in your belly the future King of England. You are carrying in your belly your purpose. You know, you've been plucked out of nowhere, basically, to create this baby, which she did very quickly, and pop it out and keep the whole show on the road. It is quite appropriate to look for a royal dimension and to see already in this act of potential sabotage an anger, a sadness, sense of tragedy, a sense of being in prison. It really brought home to her in the most solid terms the mess she got herself into and there was no way out of that she could see at that point.
How is Lady Di?
She's very well, Vicky. Marvellous.
Was it a very painful experience?
Have you ever had a baby?
No, I haven't.
I should wait and see. He's in very good form. Marvellous. And looking more healthy and more human-like.
Happy Act, Part 2. After the marriage comes the baby. Charles was still living his love affair with Camilla, but didn't mind keeping up the same charade. So, the next 2 years would be years of royal hypocrisy. William arrives with Mummy and Daddy. William on Mother's lap. The baby is drooling. Daddy comes closer to Mummy. The family is united. William takes Daddy's hand. Mama holds the baby in the air, and baby sucks his fingers, then his toy, and finishes on Daddy's lap. Before grabbing at Mother again and then going back on her lap. Until the time comes when Mummy can't take it anymore and lets Daddy know with one swift gesture. 2 years of hypocrisy during which Diana and Charles, who weren't at all brought together by the birth of their child, put on a show, just a few minutes every outing, to immortalize the idyllic scenes in front of the cameras. And 2 years later, another child arrives. This time William goes with Daddy to see the extra heir, Prince Harry, who is also entitled to a glorious arrival into the world, and the images in the car with Mummy and Daddy, and going home to home sweet home, or the place where his parents acted like they lived together. But none of this was too serious because appearances were maintained. Yes, thank you, Diana, for having accomplished your mission. Now you can do what you want. Continue to cry, travel, have lovers, it doesn't matter. The babies are here. The House of Windsor can breathe easily. And England, too. Diana's story could have stopped here. Her children would have grown up with their mother and the palace's communications team. They would have documented all the important milestones in their life. Like here, when Prince William, whose parents called him Wombat after the Australian marsupial, started school. We were there for every one of these joyful moments in life where you'd really have to have a heart of stone not to get emotional. What do you want to be when you grow up? Charles asked his oldest son. I want to be a policeman to protect Mummy, the child answers. Impossible, Charles responded. You have to be king. And while he himself was waiting to take the throne, Charles didn't lift a finger. Just stayed the same and led a double life and kept up this ménage à trois. He loved his children, though failed to love his wife. And he'd go to polo every Sunday. He was always perfect. Meanwhile, Diana was in the stands, bored out of her mind. But she was still elegant, a British specialty in which the Queen excels, but also something that can make you look a year older in 10 minutes. Her whole life, Diana would have this detached, sad quality, this walking dead look, this air of a zombie who held a bouquet in one hand while exchanging a few words of protocol with her mother-in-law, whose coldness chilled her to the bone. Except something happened that no one had expected. Something in which she certainly was not interested when she married her good little prince. Diana had become a star. Or rather, in just a few years, she had changed status. She went from being a local star like Prince Philip or the other members of the royal family, not including the Queen, to a worldwide celebrity.
The combination of being royal and being beautiful came together to create a maelstrom of media interest.
So I think she was prepared to go along with it. The press and the photographers and all that sort of thing, she saw that that was part of the game. She was learning very fast, and pretty soon she was seeing her face on the front pages of magazines that she once used to have to pay for.
Gradually, she began to realize that it gave her a power that was totally distinct from the royal family and also totally in opposition to Charles. She found actually that she could often upstage him, that people wanted to see her rather than to see him. There were royal tours that they went on where people were shouting, "We want Di, we want Di." And if they were on the side that Prince Charles was walking up, there was a sort of palpable feeling of disappointment. That made him feel very unhappy and disgruntled. After all, this was a role that he'd been born into, that he'd been schooled in his whole life.
Elle a éclipsé le prince de Galles. Un petit peu comme Jackie Kennedy avait éclipsé son mari dans les visites officielles.
That's not the point of a princess at all. And so, in a sense, it was inevitable that when this started to happen, the rest of the courtiers were going to start to get worried.
There was one occasion where the Queen was doing the state opening of Parliament, where normally the headlines the next day would be a picture of the Queen and a discussion of the government's programme. But instead, Diana had a new hairstyle that day, and the headlines were all about Diana's hair. So she was very aware of the power of her look to create attention.
Queen Elizabeth and her mother tried wearing flashy clothes or very lovely dresses. But every time Diana stepped out, all eyes were on her. After all, she had hired a vocal coach to help her with her voice. She had hired a personal trainer to help her refine her silhouette and improve her posture. She swam regularly, did gymnastics and Tai Chi Chuan. And all this did not go unnoticed.
Diana created a new interest in the monarchy, fizz and excitement. Everybody wanted to hear about her, partly because she was so glamorous.
Elle a modernisé l'image de la famille royale, de par ses tenues, de par son panache, son sens de la cérémonie. À une époque où finalement la famille royale était un petit peu triste, elle n'arrivait pas à entrer dans la modernité.
Diana, who was never aware of her charm, started to feel beautiful, and above all, began to understand that she could use the title of Royal Highness to her advantage, instead of suffering from it. And Charles, who was obligated to bring her with him on official trips, like in France, had to endure the thousands of compliments that his wife received, instead of him.
Et permettez-moi d'ajouter, madame, que votre charme et votre élégance ont depuis longtemps séduit tous les Français.
The second day of the visit to Washington by the Prince and Princess of Wales has seen thousands of people out on the streets to greet them. But it's last night's banquet at the White House, when the Princess danced with film star John Travolta, that's still the main talking point.
It was glamorous night at the White House. Mrs. Reagan was in charge of who stood where, but there was only one star on this stage. The princess's new evening gown of midnight blue velvet was complemented by a choker of pearls with the centerpiece of a stunning sapphire. Hollywood was making its entrance. Clint Eastwood managed to smile for once. Neil Diamond said he'd sing for the princess.
If I'm asked to, I'll be happy to sing.
What would you sing? Tom Selleck was hoping for a dance.
That would be nice.
It was altogether a great night. Neil Diamond did sing, and John Travolta had a Saturday night dance with the princess.
But Diana wasn't just a traditional princess. And even if she complied with the rich gold of the palace, it's clear that she would never have become so popular if she hadn't proven to be different on a personal level from the other members of her caste.
Diana became famous because she was royal, but she was loved because she was so unroyal. She was so clearly fallible.
When she had the happy or sad moments, she showed it. And that, by the way, was something that people loved about her and people picked up very easily.
Diana had an instinctive way of reaching out to people. She didn't want to be somebody who was distant, who was seen from behind glass waving in a carriage. She wanted to be somebody who made a difference to people. She was very good with children, she was very good with old people, she was very good with people who were sick and who were suffering. And so she said in her last interview, I have more in common with people at the bottom in life than people at the top. She had a natural empathy, but also as somebody who'd suffered a lot herself, who was very unhappy, she understood unhappiness.
Diana, c'est une icône pop. C'est l'équivalent dans le monde des têtes couronnées de ce que peut être Michael Jackson. C'est en effet une culture qui mêle cette forme de bienveillance, d'empathie, pleine d'émotions. On est dans l'univers de la pop culture que peuvent représenter des chanteurs qui, la main sur le cœur, vont aller faire du charity business. On est dans un monde qui a abandonné la politique, qui a abandonné l'idée de changer la vie et qui se replie sur quelques images qui vont permettre de faire rêver.
But let's be fair. Diana didn't stop after doing just a few good deeds. She wanted to leave her mark and shake up the philanthropic routine of the palace. So she widened the scope of the royal family's charitable causes.
Lorsque elle va rendre visite à des lépreux dans des léproseries, dans un déplacement en Inde, par exemple, eh bien ça, c'est quelque chose que aucune princesse n'avait fait avant elle. Ce ne sont plus les pauvres ou les enfants malades en Angleterre. Ce sont des catégories qui n'existaient pas, si je puis dire, auparavant. Lorsqu'elle prend un malade du sida dans les bras, on en est encore à s'imaginer qu'on peut attraper le sida en serrant la main de quelqu'un qui est malade.
The princess met the staff, including Shane Snape, who is 28, a state-enrolled nurse, and himself a carrier of the AIDS virus. He's had it for 2 years.
To reach out and touch the hand of an AIDS patient in the 1980s, that was a daring, revolutionary thing to do that no one, not just in the royal family, but in society, dreamt of doing.
That was a natural thing for her to do in that situation. She didn't want to be somebody who was behind closed doors wearing gloves.
As the years went by, we saw great cleverness, great understanding developing. Diana had incredible dynamism. She may not have been an intellectual, but she grasped reality. And the important truths about life. And she knew Charles was denying those to her, and she knew that the system of the monarchy was denying those to her as well.
But there were some ulterior motives behind Diana's humanitarian engagements. The relationship with the royal family had become so horrible that every time Diana could attract the attention of one more camera, it meant one less for Charles. And that made her happy. Time passed and the couple had more and more trouble hiding their arguments. So rumors started of a possible separation. Divorce, however, was not an option for those who had the unfortunate idea of marrying the future King of England.
Une idée de séparation, comme une idée de divorce, était à des allées-lumière de la réalité, d'autant plus que le souvenir de ce qui s'était passé avec Édouard VIII était très présent encore.
Edward VIII, the temperamental king who abdicated a few months after the beginning of his reign for personal convenience. He had little respect for protocol and didn't want to sacrifice his personal life for duty, so preferred giving up the throne to marry his true love, a divorced American woman named Wallis Simpson. His abdication caused real trauma within the court of England, and Queen Elizabeth, who we see here and who was just 10 years old at the time, remembers it very well. She remembers it even better because it was her father, in a completely unexpected event, who became king instead of his older brother Edward. Without his abdication, Elizabeth would never have become queen years later.
Cette notion de divorce qu'elle accepte pour certains de ses enfants, elle la refuse à l'héritier au trône parce que ça lui rappelle une crise de régime qui a failli emporter la royauté.
But unlike Elizabeth, Diana scoffed at this story and its consequences.
Diana incarne une génération qui n'a plus de mémoire, qui n'a plus de patrimoine culturel. Elle n'est pas portée par tout ce qui a fait l'histoire de l'Angleterre. Et c'est tout le conflit, en effet, sans doute, entre ces deux femmes. L'une est le produit d'une nation millénaire qui essaye de perpétuer sa façon d'être au monde, alors que l'autre est le produit d'une société de consommation dans laquelle les personnages, les têtes couronnées, les personnages publics sont un bien de consommation comme les autres.
Obligated to continue in a marriage that made them suffer more every day, Charles and Diana progressively found themselves in an unsustainable situation. They began to lay down their weapons and end the battle they'd begun from the start, which in the early 90s sparked off a media frenzy. Like the one about the official trip they took together in India in 1992. While the royal couple was supposed to pose in front of the Taj Mahal, which for people all over the world is a symbol of love, Diana ended up going by herself at the last minute, since Charles decided to go on another visit. This insult deeply hurt the princess, but a few days after, she compensated, deliberately turning her head when her husband, who had just won a rugby match, tried to kiss her on the cheek. The crowd and everyone accompanying the couple were mortified, reported their former press agent. And Charles, humiliated by having to kiss a piece of ear, seemed full of rage.
It was a very public demonstration that there was something wrong with her marriage, and she was prepared to go against all convention in order to show that.
Au moment où elle prend conscience du complot de l'establishment pour dissimuler la crise conjugale, là est la césure.
She struck back very strongly. She went out of her way to damage her husband, to leak stories against him.
The Princess of Wales has been attending the Garter service at Windsor Castle on the eve of publication of a controversial book about her life as a royal. Its author, Andrew Morton, has spoken for the first time since details of the biography became known, and he claims there's chronic instability inside the royal family.
This afternoon, the Princess arrived at St George's Chapel, Windsor, with other members of the royal family for the annual Order of the Garter service. The public gaze is on the Princess all the more because of the controversial book to be published tomorrow. Its author claims the Princess has been deeply unhappy for much of her married life and is on the horns of a dilemma about whether to remain in the royal family. Much has been made of Andrew Morton's allegation that the Princess attempted suicide on 4 or 5 occasions.
I can't emphasise strongly enough the volatility of the situation inside Kensington Palace.
When I first read the Morton book, I thought it's absolute rubbish. It's a fantasy. I was jealous as a rival, but I thought it can't be true. And then you discover it is true.
When that book came out, the earth moved. There was a thunderstorm which didn't stop.
The damaging revelations in it were quite how toxic the marriage was, that she tried to commit suicide, that she had thrown herself down the stairs, that she had bulimia, really incredibly personal details.
Can Diana have been so naive as to imagine that people wouldn't guess it came from her? Of course it came from her.
This is what the Princess of Wales has told her friends about what happened to her in 1982, in the early 80s.
Buckingham Palace say the Princess did not give authorisation for any of her friends to speak to Andrew Morton. She did her best to look composed, but the strain has been showing.
She hoped she could maintain this illusion that it was her friends talking to Morton and not her, when that was not the case.
Elle a dénudé, si je puis dire, le prince Charles. Diana a cassé tous les codes, notamment celui que même les tabloïds ne révèlent pas, le pire de ce qui se passe dans la vie privée des royals.
Il n'y a aucune pudeur, aucune tenue, aucun sens de l'intime. C'est le brouillage des catégories entre la vie privée et la vie publique. C'est une forme de pornographie de l'émotion.
And then you discover the mechanisms, the clever mechanisms by which Diana herself set up the whole conspiracy.
Editors were afraid to touch it. She personally said that she would give assurances that it was true. She was desperate to get the book out there as well.
She was an arch media manipulator, brilliant at it. But like many people in positions of power like that, she lacked judgment. And in allowing the Andrew Morton book to go forward, she nearly broke the machine. She destroyed many people's belief in the House of Windsor's right to rule. She realized that she was to blame for that. She realized she had killed people's belief in monarchy.
It's like a sort of guillotine. Obviously, it was a total declaration of war.
There was no going back. After Diana had done that, there was no possibility that she could be re-accepted within the royal family. She had already broken every royal convention, but that was throwing egg in the faces of the Queen and the rest of the royal family. It was incredibly painful.
Charles and Diana's last official voyage, Korea. Shortly before their departure, they got into a heated argument. Diana could no longer bear the rumors about her mental health that the prince's entourage had started to spread. During the whole trip, she acted like a martyr, as if she were mourning her marriage and attending her own funeral. 8,800 kilometers from home, with a complete stranger.
Diana, her true story, the Korean version, is in the shops. For Koreans, it's all deeply puzzling. I can't understand it, said this man. I just remember their wedding was so spectacular. It's very interesting, he says. We don't have books like that about leading Koreans.
And once again, Charles exclaimed, "How could you seriously think I was going to be the first Prince of Wales in history not to have a mistress?" And once again, Diana responded, "How could you seriously believe that I could suffer without it showing?" It was just a matter of months now, weeks even. The palace had to put an end to this unfortunate interlude, which had lasted more than 10 years. But what good way was there to get out of this royal vaudeville show? Diana was the mother of England's future king. They couldn't just dismiss her like they could a cook who had burned the Queen's roast. And then there was the omnipresent press that followed Diana like her shadow and immortalized every moment of her life, waiting for the smallest mistake, the tiniest faux pas. How do you get rid of a princess who takes up so much space? She was just over 30, she was energetic, she skied, jogged. Sure, she was unstable and suicidal, but up until then, her attempts were never successful, and it was very possible that she would live to be 100 years old, loved all over the world as the legitimate wife of the Prince of Wales. Yes, the year 1992 was cursed. Annus horribilis, said the Queen, who saw her youngest son, Andrew, divorce, then her daughter, Anne. A horrible year, when the palace regretted more than ever linking its fate to their unpredictable enemy, who acted like a saint, but who nevertheless succeeded in weakening the crown.
Coinciding with the ascendancy of Diana, there was a new mood in the press. The press was no longer prepared to be totally deferential to the royal family. There was an absolute hunger for stories.
Jusqu'à l'épisode Diana, les tabloïds ne faisaient que de l'actualité royale, heureuse, à la guimauve. C'est Diana qui a changé les données. Soudain, elle faisait vendre les journaux.
Newspaper editors used to say that if Diana wasn't on the front cover, then sales would go down by 30-40%, and magazines the same.
Donc il y a une concurrence entre les tabloïds et les paparazzi notamment pour mettre en une des tas d'histoires sur Diana.
But also at that time, because of the gradual breakdown of the marriage between Charles and Diana, there were rival factions in Kensington Palace. So the press had new sources of information, plenty of people who were prepared to speak.
That's how the Squidgygate scandal broke out. A scandal that, of course, evoked the Watergate scandal, which led to the resignation of American President Richard Nixon.
You'll never know how much. You'll never know how much.
The Sun published a transcription of a private conversation between Diana and one of her lovers. An intercepted conversation, completely destabilizing the princess. We heard her saying again and again, "I love you," and her lover pleasing her with affectionate and nonsensical nicknames like Squidgy. Was it really Diana's voice? Who was the mystery person on the other end? All kinds of journalists and experts had a field day.
A lot of people talk to her about me, which you can't help. No.
Based on newspaper reports yesterday, the palace said simply that the evidence to hand did not lead it to believe that the tape should be taken seriously. Today, after listening to part of the recording, a spokesman said that what he'd heard suggested that it was not possible to reach a conclusion.
The man on the audio cassette was identified as James Galby, and England met the man who could make Diana much more happy than Charles could. This was December 1992. The horribilis year was almost over. It was time to close the curtain. And it was the Prime Minister, John Major, who officially announced Charles and Diana's separation.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected. This decision has been reached amicably, and they will both continue to participate fully in the upbringing of their children. Their Royal Highnesses will continue to carry out full and separate programs of public engagements and will from time to time attend family occasions and national events together.
Actually, the separation didn't help matters. Just the opposite, in fact, because from this moment on, Diana seemed unhinged. Not 1 week, not a day without a rumor or a revelation about her heartaches and domestic worries.
Elle a un côté très très petit bourgeois, Diana, dans sa façon de mettre en avant ses malheurs personnels, de les jouer sur la scène et de montrer que ce dont elle rêve, c'est son épanouissement, elle rêve de vivre comme tout le monde. Dénoncer l'hypocrisie au nom d'une cause, au nom d'une collectivité, au nom de l'égalité, oui. Mais il n'y a pas d'héroïsme à dénoncer l'hypocrisie de l'étiquette quand c'est uniquement parce que cette étiquette vous a empêché de vivre votre bonheur individuel. Elle restait quelqu'un qui jouissait de privilèges et qui n'a pas remis en cause la nature même de ces privilèges. Elle a remis en cause le fait que ça l'empêchait d'être heureuse.
The prince thought he would be finished with what was a miserable period for him. But his wife, yes, John Major made the distinction. They were separated, not divorced. But his wife, who thought he hadn't yet had enough, continued to scorn him, preventing him from living out his passions, even the most peaceful ones. And Diana beamed, so happy to have found a taste of liberty. Because even if her agenda was still full of official obligations, they weren't as heavy and gave her time to do as she pleased. In regards to men as well. The press reported of a relationship she had with an equestrian trainer, and her bodyguard, and with an art dealer who was married himself. True or false, these adulterous relationships didn't keep the children from considering their princess as a model to whom they'd happily give flowers at every occasion.
Radieuse, légère, détendue. Tous ceux qui ont croisé Diana au cours de sa visite en France sont unanimes, la princesse de Galles semble avoir un poids de moins sur les épaules. On conçoit aisément que loin de Buckingham et de son carcan, son chaperon ni époux, Diana soit infiniment plus à l'aise, infiniment plus elle-même. En tout cas, le prince Charles a fêté samedi son 44e anniversaire seul. En guise de cadeau, les journaux anglais ont étalé à la une ses conversations avec celle qui serait sa maîtresse de longue date, Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana, victime de ce genre de mésaventure quelques mois plus tôt, était hier souriante. Peut-être pensait-elle qu'après tout, c'est bien chacun son tour.
It was only a matter of time before the tabloids printed what's been circulating in private for days, the full transcript of an alleged conversation between the Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles.
Yes, after Diana Gate, there was Camilla Gate. Everything that the English ever wanted to know about the relationship between Charles and Camilla, but were too afraid to ask. How did they speak to each other? What sweet or dirty words did they exchange when no one was watching? But ears were listening. Charles, I want to feel my entire body against yours from top to bottom, inside and out. Camilla, that's exactly what I need right now. Charles, I want to live hidden inside your trousers. It would be much easier to see you. God forgive me, but I'd like to be your Tampax. And Camilla responded that the idea was marvelous.
Cette conversation était enregistrée par un radio amateur australien qui l'a revendue à un tabloïd. Je crois qu'à ce moment-là, beaucoup de Britanniques sont dégoûtés, mais des deux, de Diana et de Charles. Mais la presse tabloïde, elle, estime qu'il n'y a plus de barrière. Tant qu'on n'attaque pas la reine, mais en revanche l'héritier au trône, c'est déconsidéré à ce point que tous les coups sont permis.
For Charles, it was no longer possible to live in silence. He also needed to talk, and to find himself a biographer, and no longer hide his discomfort and confusion.
The most damaging charge that is made in relation to your marriage is that you were, because of your relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, from the beginning, persistently unfaithful to your wife and thus caused the breakdown. What is your response to that persistent criticism?
That's the persistent criticism, is it? Well, and the trouble is, you see, that these things, again, as I was saying earlier, are so personal. It's difficult to know quite how to talk about these things in front of everybody. And obviously, I don't think many people would want to.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down.
Such a surprising one, the story of Diana. I find it fascinating to imagine what she could have been thinking. And Charles and the Queen, sitting side by side and listening to the music which, though it was beautiful, wasn't likely to soothe their souls. Marriage, wrote Nietzsche, is the most false type of relationship between a man and a woman. That's why he enjoys the esteem of beautiful souls. What could Diana have been thinking, if not that she had lived the wrong life, had the wrong in-laws, and the wrong husband? A bit later, though, in a solemn statement, she expressed another conviction, that the children she had with Charles were her most precious belonging.
Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with, hopefully, a more private life. My first priority will continue to be our children, William and Harry, who deserve as much love and care and attention as I am able to give, as well as an appreciation of the tradition into which they were born.
I think the evidence shows that she was a very natural mother, she was a very loving mother, she was a very caring, attentive mother. If you listen to Prince William or Prince Harry talking about the mother, you can see how deeply devoted they are to her memory, and clearly, therefore, they had a very close relationship.
Okay, got it. And we will swing round.
What you don't see so much of is the fact that as the marriage broke down, she started to use her children as a weapon against her husband, and she would hang on to them when she was supposed to hand them over. She would make it difficult for Charles to get access to them when it was his turn. And indeed, in the battle for ownership of those two princes, Charles had given up the ghost. In the year up to her death, he saw his children on 34 days. The rest of the time, Diana had the children. She was using them as a weapon.
Harry! Harry! Harry!
No, Mama, you can't touch it! Mama, you can't touch it! Who has to? You has to, because you saw him!
It's very successful.
This is probably when Charles and the royal family understood that the 19-year-old girl they had sought to perpetuate the Windsor line would make them pay heavily for the mission they gave her. She wanted this to be very clear. William and Harry were not the palace's property. Her children were hers, first and foremost. Yes, they had a father, and it was good that he loved them and took care of them from time to time, just to play with them or pass on a little of his knowledge. But they especially had a mother in Diana's eyes, and when it would be time for William to reign, the court should never forget that it was her flesh and blood that was ascending to the throne. And from that time on, Diana didn't miss a chance to remind everyone of that.
She became a manipulative person. The way she saw her position was that she was constantly being undermined by the royal family and by Prince Charles, so she became very manipulative.
She wanted desperately for things to be her way round. She didn't want things to be the other way round, the royal way round. So she was manipulating people, and that is where you see her emotions, her hidden emotions coming out. When you talk to the people who worked for her, who were around her, they would tell you how snake-like she could be.
What happened next was an all-out war. No more hesitation, no more nuance. Everything they had written on their faces or in the subtext, everything they hadn't yet said explicitly and officially, would now be made known. And like thousands of other children who see hate take over and consume their parents, William and Harry became witnesses to the monarchy's most highly publicized family breakup. Because their mother didn't only want to escape the hell of Buckingham, she wanted, like Attila, for no grass to grow back where her horse had passed. Never would the court of England know such public insults from one of its members.
There was quite a gap between Morton's book coming out and her finally realizing that her marriage was over. And her end game by that stage was to destroy Prince Charles. Revenge was top of her list. She hated the royal family and its establishment by that stage. She knew that she was out of the marriage, and she wanted, really, like Samson, to pull down the temple if she possibly could. And of course, she had the world's press on her side. Every time she uttered something, she was on page 1 of a newspaper. She was top of the news bulletin on TV. She had more power than this family, which had reigned for 1,000 years.
Yes, when we ask ourselves today where the devilish Diana was able to find strength and set such high goals for herself, the answer is probably linked to this media power that she had, leading her to believe that since she was more popular than the Queen herself, she was as powerful as the whole court. This is when she carries out the most suicidal act of her life. The very day the journalists surprised her in London wearing this casual outfit, she gave a televised interview, today banned from broadcast and under more locks than the Queen's crown. It was an interview that would sign her own death warrant.
The Panorama interview was a crushing moment for the monarchy.
She wanted Prince Charles never to ascend the throne. Within the confines of an interview with the BBC, the national broadcaster, there was only so much she could say. But she used that interview powerfully to say to the nation, Charles is inappropriate as your future king. You should give kingship to my son, Prince William.
D'où, à partir de ce moment-là, l'hostilité ouverte de la reine qui la traite de cinglée, parce qu'elle remet en cause l'institution royale. Elle remet en cause l'ordre de succession. Son sort est scellé.
Elle s'attaque à 1000 ans d'histoire. Et elle n'a pas compris qu'à un certain moment, elle avait dépassé la ligne jaune. Elle pouvait avoir tous les Allemands qu'elle voulait, du moment qu'elle respectait les règles de la firme. La firme, vous savez, c'est la famille royale, enfin, c'est le mot que... Là, elle n'a plus rien contrôlé. Elle ne savait plus où elle en était.
This was a fantasy concept. This was never going to happen. First of all, Prince Charles had been waiting for a very long time to be king, and he was not going to give that up simply because of the demands of an ex-wife. At the time, I did worry whether or not she was going to put her own feelings as a woman and as a scorned woman before the best interests of her country and her family and her sons. That ultimately, I think, is the tragedy of Diana.
It became an ideological war, a war over public style, over public celebrity, over the meaning of the monarchy. It finishes with Diana saying, "I wish to be Queen of Hearts," which is her way of saying the present queen is not a Queen of Hearts. But it finished, as the best wars do, as a battle for sheer survival. Someone had to win, someone had to lose, and it was Diana who lost.
Diana had underestimated the Queen and her ability to react swiftly. In December 1995, just a month after the BBC interview, the Queen went on the offensive and demanded that Charles and Diana get divorced, and fast. Convinced that she was untouchable despite her misconduct and wanting to keep all the advantages that came with her position, the princess wasn't thinking about divorce, but was very disoriented. Her popularity and the power it gives her are so closely linked to her status that she can hardly imagine another life. A life radically different than the one she had lived up until now. Sure, she jumped headfirst into a new love story, this time with a young Pakistani doctor, Hasnat Khan. "With him, I'm at peace. He gives me what I need," she explains. And she's already dreaming about traveling the world on his arm for beautiful humanitarian causes. At a food drive in Pakistan, for example, she would even go see his family in Lahore, where she's ready to live if need be. That's where the rumor started that the mother of the future King of England was ready to convert to Islam for love. But all this love, this man, this possible expatriation, isn't it just an illusion? And in the end, pushed into divorce, wouldn't she find herself desperately alone?
On the day the divorce she never wanted was finalised, Diana, Princess of Wales, as she now is, was on familiar ground, besieged by the world's media. And of immediate interest was the fact that the princess was still wearing her engagement and her wedding ring. She was said to be in good spirits, if a little quieter than usual. Her status has now been inexorably altered. Against her wishes, she's had to relinquish the title Her Royal Highness, but she'll still no doubt be known as Princess Diana, a title she could only aspire to if she'd been born a princess.
August 1996 to August 1997. 1 year separates Diana's divorce from her death. And this year was a slow descent into hell. Oh, there are still sequins and sparkles and photographers, even gowns, and the hands to shake and the stairways to gracefully descend, to twirl on the dance floor a bit, or give an award to some deserving star. Diana was happy to break from it all. But what exactly was the battle and what was the victory? Suddenly, a man's voice would resonate. "Move to New York," the voice would say amidst a crowd that laughed before the melancholic beauty who knew how to exile herself from London, from her country, from her life.
People were really expecting her to go off to America, live in America, maybe with an American billionaire or somebody like that, and no longer be a major force in British culture and society.
But in New York or Washington or Miami, what would have been different for her? Would the paparazzi and their telephoto lenses have miraculously left her alone?
Come on, get lost.
"Get lost, go to hell," she yelled at them as she was getting out of her car, furious. The devil was not elsewhere. He was there at her side. And Diana found herself trapped by her own game with the media. She didn't get 1 minute of rest, not even on holidays with her children. And all the heartbreaking pleas she kept repeating that had no chance of being heard. Please, as a mother, I'm asking you to respect my children. I want to protect them. August 1996 to 97 was Diana's horrible year, her annus horribilis, when she was trying to resist the landmines that can still mutilate and kill, though some conflicts have been over for years. She wore a crown much different than the ones she wore as a princess, and put herself in the middle of a field full of bombs, taking risks that no one would have dared in the court of England. Death, sudden and explosive, haunted her story more than ever. Milan, July 1997. This was one of Diana's last public appearances, at the funeral of fashion designer Gianni Versace, killed in Florida by a serial killer. Diana was alone in mourning, but in a new relationship, the most incredible, the most provocative of all. Dodi El Fayed, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed El Fayed.
I think she did want to provoke. She wanted to be seen with Dodi Fayed because these were not the sort of people she should be seen with. She said, I'm going to surprise you all.
It was almost a message to the British establishment that she had gone one stage further than anybody would have expected her to. Especially with Dodi Fayed, whose father was already by that stage an outspoken critic of the British establishment.
Mohamed Al Fayed a toujours voulu rentrer dans l'establishment. Et évidemment, c'est pas un club. C'est pas parce qu'on a de l'argent et qu'on peut payer la cotisation qu'on peut être admis au club. Et ça, il en a ressenti une énorme frustration. En fait, il avait construit une espèce de roman entre son fils et Diana. Et c'est pour ça qu'il l'avait invitée à Saint-Tropez, à une période où elle était délaissée, où elle savait pas très bien où aller avec ses enfants. Et il a fait venir son fils. Et puis, par un concours de circonstances, il y a eu une histoire qui s'est nouée entre eux. Et Mohamed Al Fayed en avait déjà tiré des plans sur la comète. Il aurait bien aimé, en tout cas, que cette histoire se transforme. D'ailleurs, il n'hésitait pas à payer. Il payait une montre, il avait payé des bijoux, il avait carrément acheté un yacht, le Jonical, qu'il a acheté en une semaine quand même. Hein. Et d'un seul coup, il les invite à venir au Ritz avec une arrière-pensée qui est de donner un petit peu de lustre au Ritz qu'il avait racheté une dizaine d'années auparavant. Donc, tout marche bien. Et puis d'un seul coup, patatras.
Madame, monsieur, bonjour. La princesse de Galles, Lady Di, est morte cette nuit à Paris dans un accident de voiture. Elle se trouvait avec son ami, le milliardaire saoudien Dodi Al Fayed, mort lui aussi, ainsi que le chauffeur de leur voiture, un employé de l'hôtel Ritz. Lady Di et Dodi Al Fayed étaient arrivés hier à Paris. Au sortir du Ritz, leur voiture, une Mercedes noire, a été prise en chasse par des paparazzis. L'accident a eu lieu dans le tunnel du pont de l'Alma vers minuit. Le chauffeur a perdu le contrôle de la Mercedes qui roulait, semble-t-il, à très très vive allure. La princesse, elle, est décédée 4 heures plus tard à l'hôpital de la Pitié-Salpêtrière.
Jamais elle aurait dû se trouver dans cette voiture quand même, puisque normalement elle avait un chauffeur qui était expérimenté, dans une autre Mercedes qui était elle habituelle. Jamais son chauffeur n'aurait essayé de conduire comme un fou dans les rues de Paris. Enfin, c'est une règle, tous les chauffeurs de maître vous le diront, et jamais cet accident n'aurait dû avoir lieu.
England was submerged in emotion. Diana was too familiar to everyone for them to imagine her disappearance from the front pages of papers. The violent conflict that pitted her against the royal family was so famous that her death seemed like a victory for the palace, or the finality of a conspiracy that millions of English not only wanted to mourn but also to avenge. And the royal family's attitude, nonchalant and distant as always, was too much for them to bear this time.
I was there in the crowds in the days after Diana died, and it started off just with the shock that somebody so famous, so young, so vibrant, so very alive could have been taken away in such a brutal and shocking way. And then obviously there was the massive outpouring of grief, the flowers, the lake of flowers that just grew and grew and grew outside Buckingham Palace. But that intensity of emotion after a few days turned into something else, and it turned onto the royal family, because the royal family were not responding. They were perceived as shutting themselves away in Balmoral, as being very distant from the emotions that the public were feeling.
And I'm devastated. I'm a great royalist. It's just too terrible.
I just feel it is my duty to be here to say goodbye to Diane, my princess.
I don't think I would have done this for any other member of the royal family.
The week after Diana died was, without doubt, the worst in the history of the House of Windsor. People lost faith in the royal family's ability to connect with them. The Queen refused to acknowledge the severity of the impact on the nation of Diana's death. People still saw her as being royal. They saw her as the mother of the future king. But the royal family thought she wasn't royal anymore. So why should we make such a fuss?
And the symbol of that became the flagpole on Buckingham Palace, that there was no flag up, that no flag was flying at half-mast, and that became a really powerful symbol of how the monarchy just, at that moment, did not care enough.
The royal standard is never flown at half-mast. It wasn't even for the Queen's own father, the King. It completely surprised and rather shocked courtiers at Buckingham Palace when these demands, insistent demands, came in from all over the place that they should break a precedent of hundreds of years and fly this particular flag at half-mast.
C'était des signes d'une tradition qui, pour le coup, paraissait totalement poussiéreuse. Les journaux britanniques parlaient de cobwebbed monarchy, une monarchie pleine de toiles d'araignée. Et cette incompréhension a pu nourrir l'idée que finalement, on n'avait pas besoin de monarchie, que la reine était out of touch, déconnectée des préoccupations des gens, et qu'on pourrait peut-être effectivement se passer d'elle.
Jamais la monarchie n'a été autant menacée par le courant républicain. Pour la première fois au cours de cette semaine, le courant républicain, qui est plus ou moins constant à 10-12%, est monté jusqu'à 25%.
1 week. For 1 week after the accident, it's true, the British monarchy vacillated, and some even thought this would allow for the posthumous revenge of the young princess. But people forgot, once again, that Diana was David and Elizabeth was Goliath. Encouraged by Tony Blair, her new prime minister, the Queen, great professional of hypocrisy, succeeded in 48 hours to turn the situation to her advantage with her finely tuned manipulation tactics and feigned emotion.
I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys.
All it took was one speech by the Queen, one return to London, for the boys to look at the flowers, to walk behind their mother's coffin, and suddenly everything's all right.
Monarchy won, as monarchy always does.
I think it's an indication of how incredibly malleable the royal family is ultimately. They are, if nothing else, superb survivors. If enough people are demanding something, they know how to lance the boil and actually to do something that is going to deflect criticism.
Shortly after the death of Diana was the 50th anniversary of the marriage of Elizabeth and Philip. And you could not imagine a more celebrated royal event, as if nothing had ever been. The waters had closed over Diana, and she was effectively forgotten.
Diana, forgotten? It's hard to believe. And yet, it's not a coincidence that there's only a little basin and a children's park named after her in London. Today, the English monarchy is as grand as it is amnesic. Charles ended up marrying Camilla. Kate has become the new stylish princess, and the Queen is more firmly seated on her throne than ever. But after all, how could Diana have changed the order of the world? She was not an insurgent, just a young, emotional princess, beautiful and sad in her kingdom. One who slammed doors and broke vases. Diana was an image. She belonged to the ephemeral world, and a world of consumerism and entertainment. In any case, she was still a moment of grace in the ferocious history of the English monarchy. She had undeniable personal and human qualities, true compassion for the weak, and the admiration that she had for people like Mother Teresa who committed their lives to helping the needy was sincere. When Nelson Mandela met her shortly before she died in Paris, the kind regards he had toward her weren't just protocol. He was touched by Diana, and especially by the fact that she had no racial prejudices, in contrast with the xenophobic sentiments of many English aristocrats. And maybe that's what we need to learn from Diana's story. That it's not good to be too humane, at least in the suffocating little world of royalty. In any case, hopefully little girls who dress up like princesses for their birthday and dream of Prince Charming remember the lesson. It's better when you grow up not to make the same mistake as Diana, and to stay far, far away from palaces, carriages, royal antics, and princely lies.